bang down a door, barge into someone's home. If you're the FBI or a local police officer, you need a judicial warrant from a judicial officer, a judge, who is going to find or not probable cause, which has a specific meaning under the law. These ICE agents are banging down doors doing the same thing without that kind of judicial warrant. What is so different about ICE that it regards itself as an exception to the Fourth Amendment? And the requirement for a judicial warrant is a Fourth Amendment requirement.
We don't, Senator. There is case law, U.S. versus Lucas, 2007, which is out of the 8th District of Minnesota, which authorizes the entry of a home to catch a fugitive based on an administrative warrant.
I beg your pardon, sir. It does not abrogate the Fourth Amendment. It does not say that ICE agents or CPP agents can simply bash down doors and barge into people's homes, terrorize their children, detain and arrest people without a judicial warrant. And there is nothing different about what ICE does as compared to the FBI or local police that would justify it. The policy that they're acting under, in fact, is the result of a memo that you issued in May. You're familiar with it.
Yes, sir.
Has your signature.
Yes, sir.
Which says, in effect, they don't need judicial warrants. They can act on the basis of the 205 warrant that you just described, which is administrative. It's not judicial. To bang down a door, barge into someone's home, if you're the FBI or a local police officer, you need a judicial warrant from a judicial officer.
Ms. Bondi, I'm here. On September 25th, President Trump signed a memorandum known as NSPM 7, purporting to address domestic terrorism. But Americans across the political spectrum were immediately alarmed by the memo's blurring of the line between unlawful conduct and constitutionally protected speech and activity, as well as its call to investigate, prosecute, and dismantle groups that the president and Stephen Miller described without evidence as, quote, an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. Now, counterterrorism experts were further alarmed by the administration's singular focus on left-wing extremism, combined with the sudden deletion from the DOJ website of decades of research and law enforcement analysis, which had concluded that right-wing extremism poses the greatest terrorism threat to Americans. The president's memo broadly and vaguely links violent conduct to ideologies, and it targeted specifically anti-American, anti-Christian, and anti-capitalist beliefs, as well as, quote, hostility to so-called traditional American views on family, religion, and morality, end quote. President Trump has repeatedly and openly, however falsely, tried to brand his political opponents with these sentiments listed in his memo. But as you know, as a lawyer, holding beliefs that the White House disagrees with is not a crime. And the statute defining domestic terrorism requires criminal acts, not just thoughts and ideas. That's why legal experts, nonprofit leaders, religious freedom, and civil rights advocates immediately raised the alarm that the new presidential directive was a politically motivated attack on civil society designed to silence those who disagree with the administration. So,
how you define white identity and what you think is being erased about white identity?
Certain types of Anglo-derived culture that comes from our history.
Like what?
Let me think about this. Senator, I would say if you were to look at the book by one of your former Senate colleagues, Born Fighting, about the sort of Scotch-Irish military culture and certain, pride that went with that, that would be one example. Obviously, you could have sub-elements of that culture. You could have Italians, you could have Irish, and those are in many ways more
distinct. But you're worried about white culture. You're not worried about, you're now retreating to ethnic identity. You don't speak about ethnic identity. You speak about white identity. So tell me the values that stitch together white identity. and that make it different than black identity?
I would say that the white church is very different than the black church in terms of its tone and style on average. Foodways could often be different.
And those
music could be different.
And those are being erased.
Music could be different. Well, if you look at the Super Bowl halftime show, which was not in English this year.
So our ability to access white churches or white food or white music is being erased.
I am concerned with the majority common American culture that we had for some time, that through particularly mass immigration, I think has become much more balkanized, and I think that weakens us. And again, I'm not running away from that comment. I'm not apologizing for it.
Well, I'm way over my time. I think you're struggling to answer this question, right? Because underlying your beliefs is a sentiment that white culture is just simply better. Tell me how you define white identity and what you think is being erased about white identity.
Certain types of
That memo directed you, as Attorney General, to submit to the President and Stephen Miller a list of groups or entities whose members are engaged in acts that meet the definition of domestic terrorism. And then on December 4th, you directed the FBI to work with a variety of law enforcement entities to compile a list of groups and entities engaged in such acts by January 3rd, 2026, and to update that report every 30 days thereafter. So can we assume that you or persons under your direction at the Department of Justice have prepared that list of groups or entities who are designated as domestic terrorist organizations? And I just remind you, that's a yes or no question. Did you
I'm
prepare
not
the
going to answer
list?
it yes or no, but what I will say is I know Antifa is part of that. I will
Okay.
I will talk to you about
I'm
that.
reclaiming
and on
my time.
February
I
5th,
asked you
2025,
whether you
an
prepared
Antifa member
a
was
list.
arrested in Minneapolis
I'm
federal court
reclaiming
for
my
cyber
time.
stalking.
Did you
they
have
ask a question
a
and
list?
don't want an answer. This
The
is
answer is yes or
Because-
no.
Time belongs to the gentle lady from Pennsylvania. Gentle lady can proceed.
Okay, so will you commit to providing this committee with any list of organizations that you have recommended be designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
we will comply with the law in all matters.
Will you commit to provide this committee with your list of entities that you recommend be designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
I'm not going to commit to anything to you because you won't let me answer questions.
Okay, well then, we do understand that your current position is that you have a secret list of people or groups that you are accusing of domestic terrorism, but you won't share it with Congress. And I'd remind you that when the US government designates an entity as a foreign terrorist organization, it must report that to Congress and to the entity, because the government can make a mistake and the entity has the opportunity to contest it. So your position seems to be that if you falsely designate an American or an American organization as a terrorist group, there's nothing they can do about it. I think we get it. You don't want to answer the
No,
question.
you don't get anything
This
regarding
committee-
public safety.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Thank you for the insult. It's clear you didn't come to Congress prepared to answer questions that the American people have every right to have answered. But if you were to prepared to answer truthfully, here's what we expect the facts to show. The administration is keeping lists of Americans who the White House says are engaged in domestic terrorism. Those lists could include Americans who have not committed any acts of terrorism, but simply disagree with this administration, people like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And your list may include clergy, elected officials, and members of